So welcome to the Eclipse Soundscapes Observer role training. Oh, jumped ahead. My name is Mary Kay Severino. I am the Education Director and one of the leads on the Eclipse Soundscapes project. And I am joined here today by Dr. Henry Trey Winter, who is the Chief Scientist at Arista Lab and the other lead on the Eclipse Soundscapes project, as well as Kelsey Perrette, who is here with us too. She is the social media coordinator and content writer for the Eclipse Soundscapes project. And throughout the presentation, you can certainly ask questions. We ask that you will put them into the question and answer section on Zoom or hold them until the end of the presentation. At the end of the presentation, you'll have the opportunity to type them in there. And we'll also give an opportunity for people to say them out loud if that is more convenient and accessible for you. So we will be closing up the chat and directing people to the question and answer button for Zoom. That'll make it a little easier to manage the questions. So what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about what you might expect to observe on April 8th, the day of the total solar eclipse, the science question overview for Eclipse Soundscapes, when and for how long to observe, a little bit about eclipse observation safety, what to observe for Eclipse Soundscapes, where to observe for Eclipse Soundscapes, field notes, how to submit your observations, and then how to include Eclipse Soundscapes in the classroom or at events. Everything that I am talking about today, and probably in even greater detail, is available at eclipsesoundscapes.org. There is a button at the top that says participate. And if you choose the observer role, there is the observer role page that has the requirements and the training, observation information, field notes, what to do on Eclipse Day, how to submit the observations, how to do the observer role in the classroom, observer role at events. All of that is available at eclipsesoundscapes.org. So if there's anything that you want more information about after today, you can certainly rewatch this video. We will post it on the website as well, or you can go to the observer role section on the website. Eclipse Day observations. What could you expect on Eclipse Day? So there's all sorts of different sights, different sounds, different feels in terms of temperature that happen at dawn, during the day, at dusk, and at night. And all of those things happen, but during a total solar eclipse, it mimics a rapid day-night cycle. And this happens at an unexpected time, right in the middle of the day, and very quickly. During a total solar eclipse, if you are on the path of totality, when the moon creeps in front of the sun and blocks out the sun's light from reaching the earth, it will slowly appear like it's becoming dusk and then night and then dawn again, but in a matter of minutes. And so what we're interested in is, how will nature respond? Will it respond as it does during a normal day-night cycle? Will the nighttime animals and crickets and insects and birds come out? Will the daytime animals and birds and insects that usually come out at dawn appear towards the end of totality? What's going to happen? Because nature hasn't been preparing for this. And we're not the first people to ask this question. This is something that scientists have been wondering. And that brings us to our science question. How does life on Earth, specifically wildlife, respond to solar eclipses? And the Eclipse Soundscapes project is recreating a study from almost 100 years ago. And at that time, Wheeler, a scientist along with other scientists, asked the same question and reached out to the public for help. Wheeler put an ad in the newspaper and asked people to send in their animal observations from during the 1932 eclipse. And approximately 500 people responded, just mailing in what they heard, what they felt, what they saw, all sorts of different multi-sensory observations, demonstrating that eclipses are multi-sensory events. They are not just something that you see, they're something that you hear, they're something that you feel. And so we are recreating this study from almost 100 years ago during the October 14th, 2023 annular eclipse, which recently happened, and during the upcoming April 8th, 2024 total solar eclipse. And the way we're recreating it is with the help of the general public again, via a couple different roles. One of those roles is a data collector, which is a week-long activity where people collect audio data with an AudioMoth recorder. And the other is an observer, which is an eclipse day activity. And that's what we're talking about today. How can you go out and do observations and support this question and help us figure out how does life on Earth, specifically wildlife, respond to solar eclipses? So let's talk a little bit about when and for how long you should observe on April 8th. We recommend observing for approximately 25 to 30 minutes, about 10 minutes or so before eclipse maximum, during eclipse maximum, and 10 minutes after eclipse maximum. So what is eclipse maximum? Eclipse maximum is when the most possible amount of the sun's light is blocked from view. This happens for several minutes in the middle of the eclipse. The eclipse will last for a few hours. The maximum phase will only last for a few minutes. If you are on the eclipse path, this maximum phase is called totality. And that's when all of the sun's light is blocked and you will get to see that magnificent corona peeking out from around the edges. If you are near the eclipse path, but not on it, this is when the most possible amount will be covered and you are experiencing a partial eclipse. And you might notice there's someone on the screen that is wearing eclipse glasses. It's important to mention that if you're out on eclipse day and you're out observing, if you decide that you would like to look up at the sun, you do need to be wearing eclipse glasses, not sunglasses, special eclipse glasses. If you are near the eclipse path and you're experiencing a partial eclipse, you will always be wearing these when you choose to look up at the sun. If you are on the eclipse path, only during the few minutes of totality, when all of the sun's light is blocked, during those few moments, you may briefly remove your glasses because all of the sun is blocked. And then you must immediately put them back on when the moon starts to creep away. So eclipse safety is very important. And so I am going to play a short video. Most of this training will be me chatting with you and going through some slides, and then at the end answering questions. But I do want to share this very short, approximately 4-minute video from the American Astronomical Society, or AAS. And the American Astronomical Society has done a great job of making eclipse safety really clear and understandable. This particular video was made for the 2017 solar eclipse, but it is still relevant and valid and has great information. So I will briefly share that with you.
The All-American Solar Eclipse of August 21, 2017 is set to be the year's biggest celestial event. The eclipse is a must-see, but you need to know what you're doing to avoid injuring your eyes. Here are some tips for enjoying safe sun. Rick Feinberg of the American Astronomical Society has seen lots of solar eclipses. He has some advice and warnings about viewing the August 21, 2017 eclipse. He says everything depends on whether you're in the roughly 70-mile wide path of totality, stretching from Oregon to South Carolina. Only in that narrow zone will you experience a total eclipse, in which it'll get dark and, weather permitting, you'll see the corona, the sun's ethereal atmosphere.
During totality, when the moon is completely blocking the sun's bright face, you don't use any filters. You look right at it. You can look right at it with binoculars, you can look right at it with a telescope. But at all other times, during the partial phases, before and after totality, or if you're not in the path of totality, throughout the partial eclipse, you must use safe solar filters.
What are safe solar filters, you ask?
The most common kind available now are these eclipse shades or eclipse glasses. If you go online and search for solar eclipse shades or solar eclipse glasses, you'll find many suppliers, many retailers who sell them. They're cheap, they're like $1 or $2 a piece. And they're made from a special material that blocks all but about 1/1,000,000th of the sun's light. And that's across the whole electromagnetic spectrum, so it makes looking at the sun directly perfectly safe. So the proper way to use these is to not look at the sun, but to put them on and then look up at the sun. Dark sunglasses won't work. Any other filter that you can improvise won't work.
Feinberg also says one of the best ways to watch the eclipse, especially the total phase if you're in the path of totality, is with binoculars. There's just one thing to remember.
You cannot use them at any other time unless you have special filters that go over the front of the binoculars. Okay? These are only used this way, without any filters, during the total phase of the eclipse.
If you want to capture a souvenir photo, you don't need anything more elaborate than a cell phone camera. But as Rick explains, the same solar filter rules apply.
Except during totality, you have to use a safe solar filter, and it has to go in front of the camera. So what I do is I take half of one of those eclipse shades that I showed you earlier, and I put it over the camera, and I tape it on so that it doesn't blow off or fall off. And then I can just point my cell phone up at the sun, zoom in, and take a picture.
You can also resort to a true hands-on technique.
You put the sun at your back, and you get out of the way, and you cross your fingers, make a little waffle pattern with your fingers, and it creates several little holes between your fingers, and those project images of the sun right on the ground.
If you're within the path of the moon's dark inner shadow on August 21st, you'll experience a total eclipse lasting at most 2 minutes 40 seconds. During this brief phase, it's okay to look directly at the sun without filters. But at all other times, and at all times if you're outside the path of totality, follow the safety instructions Feinberg described. Except during totality, never look at the sun through a camera, binoculars, or a telescope unless it is covered over the front by a safe solar filter. Never use eclipse shades while looking through a camera, binoculars, or a telescope. The concentrated sunlight will melt the eclipse shade you're wearing and injure your eyes. On August 21st, wherever you are in North America, enjoy the eclipse safely.
Okay, so you might have noticed in that map, it was showing the 2017 eclipse path, which stretched diagonally across the country in the opposite direction from what is happening in 2024 on April 8th. But otherwise, all of this eclipse information is really great and helpful. And you can learn more about anything related to eclipse day safety at eclipse.aas.org/I-safety. Let me head on to the next slide. So you might be wondering, say, if you are on the eclipse path, and some of you might have gotten the opportunity to play around with this at the beginning of the presentation. There is a tool on the eclipsesoundscapes.org website, the Eclipse Location Tool. You can use this to find out the time and also the coverage. So you can find out, are you on the eclipse path? Are you at 100%? You can also find out what time will the eclipse start in your area? What time is eclipse maximum? And what time will the eclipse end? On the screen right now, I do have an example. I use the zip code 14612 for April 8th, 2024, and found out that the eclipse will start at 2:06 p.m. and end at 4:33 p.m. So it goes on for about 2.5 hours. But as an Eclipse Soundscapes observer, you really need to know when is that maximum time. Since this is at 100%, this is on the eclipse path, that will be totality. And that maximum eclipse phase is at 3:21 p.m. And that maximum phase starts at 3:19 and ends at 3:23. So as an Eclipse Soundscapes observer, you want to be observing at least 10 minutes before that. So you would want to start observing around 3 o'clock, 3:10. and then keep observing through the maximum phase, through 3:19 and 3:23 when it will be much darker. And then again for about 10-15 minutes afterwards until about 3:30, 3:35. That's the time frame that you want to observe. And so you can also use this tool to help you figure out when you should make sure to observe and when it is a cool time to experience the eclipse. So now let's talk about what to observe on April 8th. We want to observe what you notice before, during, and after eclipse maximum, these three separate points, and if there's any changes between these time frames. So the 10 minutes before, what animals do you hear? What animals do you see? What's going on with people? What are people doing? We're animals too. What's going on with vehicles? You might be in an urban environment, a city. You might be hearing cars and trucks and other things. And then during eclipse maximum, what do you hear? What do you see? What do you feel? Has anything changed? Are you hearing different animals, different insects, different birds? What's going on with people? Have they changed their behavior? What's going on with vehicles? Did they all stop in the road? That could be. And then again, the 10 minutes after. Again, what do you hear? What do you see? What do you feel? Maybe there's different insects, different birds, different mammals. Maybe people are behaving differently. Maybe the vehicles are right back to what they were doing before, or maybe they never changed. So these are all the what you're observing. So where, a lot of people ask, where should I go to observe? Outside is the main requirement. You should be outside to observe. And then what are we looking for as Eclipse Soundscapes project? We're certainly interested in nature and animals and living things. We're very interested in crickets and those sorts of insect sounds, but you may or may not be in an environment where you'll be able to hear these sounds. So we just want you to really be in tune with your environment and use all the senses that are available to you and start to think about how animals and insects are reacting during this eclipse. Do daytime animals and insects get quieter? Do they seem to start behaving differently during totality? Do nighttime animals appear and get louder? And if you want to figure out where you should go, you could do a little research beforehand. On the Eclipse Soundscapes website, in the Observation Info tab, we do have a link to a project called iNaturalist. iNaturalist is a project where people all over the world make observations about different insects and animals, different mammals, amphibians, all sorts of different living creatures that they observe in all sorts of different areas. So if you would like to find out what sorts of creatures live in your area, you can check this out beforehand. Maybe you want to make sure that you go somewhere where others have heard lots of crickets. And so you could do a little exploration beforehand on the iNaturalist website and find out where you should go. If you've already chosen your location, then that's where you will be and that's where you should observe. Now let's talk about what notes you should take. All scientists take notes, and it's really important to take these notes. We might think that we're going to remember everything afterwards, but that usually isn't the case. So taking field notes is important. This is some of the information that you will need to submit after the eclipse to the project so that we can use all of this amazing observation data. We need your latitude and longitude, and the format is decimal degrees or DD format. And this is typically how it is shared if you use your phone to get latitude and longitude. But we do have more information about that on eclipsesoundscapes.org. We also need some information about the location. Is it urban? Is it suburban? Is it a countryside? Are you in a forest? Are you in a park? Are you in a stadium? Where are you? Make note of this. What time do you start observing? Did you start at 3:05 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time? What time did you stop? And do make sure that you write down your time zone. That will be important because we are asking for observations from all over the country. And then make sure to write down your multi-sensory observations during each time frame. Before eclipse maximum, during eclipse maximum, and after eclipse maximum. Everything that you hear, that you see, that you feel. And you can include feelings of excitement too. What you feel might be temperature drops, or it might be excitement, peace, enjoyment. Those are all great observations too. You can take these notes wherever is best for you in a notebook that you already have. You can also download field notes paper from the website if you want a guide where all these questions are asked right on that paper. So on eclipsesoundscapes.org, there is a section in the Observer part called Field Notes, and you can download the field notes in PDF form in English or in Spanish. And there's also information on that same page about how to record the location, the latitude and longitude instructions, how to figure out how to do it in decimal degrees format. Then what is very important, the very, very important final step of being an Eclipse Soundscapes Observer is making sure that you get those observations to us, to the project. The Eclipse Soundscapes team really needs that information. And the way that you get that information to us is by submitting it online. You go to eclipsesoundscapes.org, and in the Observer section, there is a place to submit your observations. There's a button there. The button will open on April 8th, and it will stay open until April 15th. So if on Eclipse Day, maybe you're out somewhere where you don't have internet service, make sure you take your field notes, and then you can submit them when you get somewhere with internet. That's no problem. Just make sure you write everything down so that you have that information and are able to submit it. And after you submit your observations, you will receive a certificate of completion that you can download or print. Now, it is possible to include the Eclipse Soundscapes Observer role in the classroom if you're an educator. There is a section on the website in the resources section. Underneath the resources, there's educator resources, and there is observer role curriculum. This is companion curriculum, some additional lesson plans that you could use in the classroom before the eclipse to teach about what solar eclipse maximum is, what might happen in nature during a solar eclipse, the rapid day-night cycle that I mentioned. There's also practice for multisensory observing. And then the eclipse might be happening during school time or not during school time. So maybe sending your students home with the field notes paper, if it's not in school time, for them to complete with their families could be an option, or it could be something that you do together if you are in school. And then maybe all work together, go to the computer lab and enter your observations. It's also great to include the Eclipse Soundscapes Observer role if you're planning an event. Maybe it's a small amount with just a small event with just friends and family in your yard. Well, you could certainly print out some field notes papers and let everyone get involved. Or maybe it's a bigger event at a library or even as big as a stadium. We do have information on eclipsesoundscapes.org specifically for events. There's a quick start guide so that you can download some information easily and be able to share this out with people. And that is available in English and Spanish. All right, so now I've gotten to the point where we can open this up for questions. You might have been asking some questions in the chat. Maybe there's some questions that got asked a few times. First, I'll ask Kelsey or Trey if there's any questions in the chat that you think that we should say out loud so that everyone can hear the responses.
You know, I don't think so, Mary Kay. The one really good question that came up with a couple of people was where they could find materials in Spanish, since this particular meeting will not be conducted in Spanish. What kind of resources do we have offered?
That is a great question. The website is in English and Spanish, and the apprentice role, which is an Eclipse learning role has a lot of great videos and information that are also in Spanish. So if there are some videos that you want to utilize that talk about Eclipse Maximum or the Eclipse Path or all of those sorts of things, you could also find them in the apprentice role. All right, I'll give this, I'll take an opportunity now for anyone who maybe didn't want to use the type in Q&A chat or would just prefer to ask out loud. If there's anyone who would like to do that, I'll give you the opportunity. You can just say your name and let us know your question. And I know some people will use the hand raising and some won't. I see someone did use it. Benedette Manning, do you have a question I can answer?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Let's see. Yeah, I kind of stumbled on this meeting by accident. I thought it was for the sound part. I'm definitely doing the sound part, but I'm thinking, okay, I'll do observer part 2. Do you have to pre-sign up to be the observer, or can you just decide to do it that day and then send in, download your observations?
That's a great question. So you do not have to sign up beforehand to be an Eclipse Soundscapes Observer. We do have it on the website as recommended. And the reason we have it as recommended is when you sign up, we send lots of tips and reminders that help you out along the way and remind you to do certain things. So if you would like those tips and reminders, I recommend signing up so that you get all that information. But you can certainly just take down all this information on Eclipse Day and submit it later when you get home or in the few days afterwards.
Thank you.
And it looks like David Manigold. I might have to unmute you.
David, you should be unmuted if you do have a question you want to ask out loud. Otherwise, we can come back to you.
All right,
I'm
let's
going to
see.
pass it over to David Manigold.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is my name's Andrew. I am going to observe from Hot Springs, Arkansas, and they're expecting it to be really busy. Is crowd noise going to be an issue with recordings, or is that something you would be interested in as well? Do I need to try to avoid crowds?
For recording, so that's for the other role, the Eclipse Soundscapes data collector role with the audio moth recording device, but I can absolutely answer that question too. Whenever possible, it's great to put out the recording device away from crowds, but that's not always possible and it's not always known. So we would still ask you to just put it in the best possible place that you can.
Perfect, thank you.
Go ahead, Patricia Atkinson, if you had a question.
Yes, I have a question about the timing of before the eclipse maximum, just to make sure I'm clear on when to start. I'm going to be doing my observations in a wetland out in my boat, I hope, unless it's snowing. because I'm from upstate New York. I mean, you never know. So my question is, do we wait until we see the beginning of the shadow on the sun, or just before then? You know, and then you record right up for the before part right up until you get totality, and then you move to that section there. Is that clear?
So what I would recommend is for your area, looking up the eclipse maximum time and using the time as your guide as opposed to what shadows you may or may not see.
Okay.
Making sure that you observe a minimum of 10 minutes. If you're able to go out and observe for 15 or 20 minutes before that maximum phase happens, and you're upstate New York, so you're probably totality or close to it is my guess.
Yeah, we're totality.
Totality. So that eclipse maximum will probably be about 3 or 4 minutes. So making sure to observe for 10, 15, if you're out there observing for 20 minutes, that's great. Just writing down all that information of what you're hearing, what you're seeing. And because all of you participating, many of you are locals in your area, you might know the species of things you're hearing because you know your areas. Write that down too. That's amazing information. And then, yes, as soon as the clock or the time is telling you that totality is starting, though that's that separate time frame when you want to take notice of what you're hearing, what you're seeing. And then once that totality ends again, that third time frame. So we're trying to figure out the whole day-night cycle. Is that going to happen in this sped up version? Are animals going to quickly react? A lot of anecdotal evidence says they will.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
David, would you like to try one more time to ask your question?
Actually, I didn't have a question. I hit the wrong button. Sorry.
No worries. We will move right along then. Mary Kay, since we don't have any more hands raised in this moment, there's some questions in the Q&A about what's going to happen with the data afterwards, how people are going to be able to access it, use it, that sort of thing. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Our plan is to make all of this data open and accessible and make sure that it goes into a repository where people can access it. The best place to keep watching is eclipsesoundscapes.org. We have a few different places that we're figuring out right now. One of those places might be Rainforest Connection Arbomon system as a place to listen to the data. We're still working on that to see if that's going to be a possibility. And we're also working with NASA, which is the funding organization, to find out where they might recommend to put all of this data. There's going to be a lot of data, and we really want to make sure that it is open and available. So I would just recommend staying on some of our updates lists to find out when we post data. Even after the eclipse, remain on the updates list so that we can let you know when that starts getting posted, and we will always put links to where it goes from eclipsesoundscapes.org.
How about Bryce? Go ahead with your question, Bryce Nolan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So I've got kind of a two-part question. I got really excited about this project because I just happened to see somebody post about it. Went through the whole process to sign up to be one of the audio moth observers, and then only after I went through that whole process, realized that the kind of the window to get that free audio moth sent to you had closed. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just do the observer. Because I was looking around online at the possibility of getting an audio moth and, you know, doing the recording and also doing the observing role. Is there anywhere in particular that y'all would suggest picking one of those up that's a little more inexpensive than the hundreds of dollars that I'm seeing for them online?
The place that we've seen the easiest availability and the lower price, probably not the lowest, but in terms of being able to get it quickly, is the link that we have on the site, which is LabMaker, which I believe is approximately $100, and I don't believe that includes shipping. There are sometimes group gets campaigns to be able to get audio moths, but those you have to wait until enough people sign up for that to go out. It is an open source, relatively inexpensive recording device, but is not necessarily as easy to get. And I know it is not inexpensive. That is, when I say relatively inexpensive, it's because we chose it as inexpensive as we could in a way that would still allow for scientific grade audio. So we made sure not to choose the ones that cost thousands of dollars that have been used in some other similar audio studies that were done in 2017 by National Park Service, for example. So I know they're not, an audio moth isn't inexpensive, but it was as inexpensive as we could find for this project. And yes, unfortunately, the time frame to get a free kit from the Eclipse Soundscapes team did end on January 31st. And I know that does mean that some people were not able to get them, but we definitely hope, as you mentioned, that you will participate as an Eclipse Soundscapes observer, and we hope that that is the case.
Thank you.
Mary Kay,
Yes.
we are getting lots of questions from facilitators about having multiple observers at their location and what is the best way for them to submit multiple observations. Should each observer sign in for their own account, or can one person submit the observations of many people in their community?
I would recommend, whenever it's possible, for each observer to submit their own observations, because each person will observe things differently, even at the same location. They might have different knowledge about what they're hearing or what they're seeing. However, if you're in a group and you're doing it together, and you all might have one paper that you're all putting all the notes on that one paper, if you want to just submit it as one submission from that one spot, you could certainly do that. When you submit it, you do get the ability to download and print your observer certificate, and you do have the opportunity to add the name yourself. So if you were submitting, maybe you're a team of 5 people all together using one piece of paper, and one person's going to submit for that team, maybe you want to download the certificate, and then you could handwrite on there everyone's name from that team who was a part of that. I'll add, though, if you are a facilitator for hundreds, I wouldn't recommend doing that. More of a, if you're a small team of a few people.
Mary Kay, we had a few other questions about the eclipse percentage in different areas and whether you need to be directly in the path of totality to be an observer or a data collector.
Oh, that's a great question. So for an Eclipse Soundscapes observer, you can be anywhere. We would like observations from on the eclipse path, from off the eclipse path, near the eclipse path. So anywhere you are, we would like your observations. It would be interesting to know at what point does it start to make a difference. Are these changes only going to happen along the path of totality, or is 95% enough for there to be noticeable changes in the environment? Or 90% or 85%, where is that point? In terms of being a data collector, you can be on or near the path as well, for that exact same reason, because we want to know at what point do those changes happen. Now, in terms of what the Eclipse Soundscapes team specifically will analyze, we will most likely analyze specifically data that is on or near the path, but make all of the data available, because we want lots of people to be able to do studies like that in the future. At what point of the maximum phase is necessary for there to be changes? I'll actually stop share and turn on my camera. I had it off for most of the time because that makes it easier for the recording to be able to see the slides, but I'll go ahead and turn it off for any last questions.
Mary Kay, there was one other question that I thought was a really good one about the observer notes that you're going to be using in the field versus the observer form that you're going to use to actually submit your observations. Could you just talk a little bit about that process and the difference between those two things?
Sure. So the observer notes, that handout is there so that you can do this offline. You can download that form and use it on a device if that's what's accessible for you, or you could print out that form or just make note of what's on that form and add notes wherever you want so that you can be in the moment during the eclipse, experiencing it in that multi-sensory way. Or what are you hearing? What are you feeling? What are you seeing? And then those notes, those field notes, are going to help you be able to answer all the questions in the survey that's on the website. We don't want you to have to go through that survey while you're trying to enjoy your eclipse experience. But if you try to fill that survey out later that day or the next day, you might forget what you experienced. So those notes are going to support you and making sure that you know what information you need. And then we want to give you that week afterwards to enter that into the form. And the survey is going to ask you different questions. It's going to ask, do you have sound observations to submit? If you don't have any and you choose no, the survey won't ask you any more questions about sound. It will ask you, do you have visual or sight observations to submit? If you don't have any and you check no, it won't ask you more questions about that. If you check yes, it's going to start asking you a few questions. What did you hear in terms of insects? Did you hear insects? Did you hear birds? When you answer yes or no to those certain questions, or I don't know, which is also an okay answer, the survey will guide you through answering. So that paper beforehand is just to get you prepared for that survey and to make sure that you don't have to be online on a survey on your phone if you don't want to be during the eclipse.
We've had some other questions too, and I apologize if you answered this already, Mary Kay, because I've been typing while you're answering questions. But questions about participating from other countries, mainly Mexico and Canada, and whether those folks are invited to participate and how they would handle the zip code field that comes with a lot of our forms.
That's a good question. For the observer role, absolutely. If you are in Mexico, if you're in Canada, please submit your observations. We would love to have them. That zip code place, if you are outside the country, you can enter 5 nines in its place. 99999. I think I just said 5 nines, but 5 nines in the zip code spot. And we'll know that that means that you are outside the country. And then you'll have your latitude and longitude, and we'll know where you're adding those observations from.
Mary Kay, real quick. I am typing another answer, so I'm gonna ask if you know off the top of your head, how many people have signed up to participate as observers at this point?
Don't know the exact number, but I want to say that it is over 700. So I am not exactly sure. And we also expect that lots of people will decide to participate the day of. So there might be a lot of people that we don't know are going to be Eclipse Soundscapes observers, and we won't necessarily know until those observations start coming in. And we will start posting information about where we're getting observations from. And there is a place on the website too where we've started to update how many people have signed up, and I'm going to see if I can quickly find that link and get that into the chat. I believe it is in resources and in the media section, actually. Which we might need to put a better link. That's not the most obvious place. Here is in the chat, eclipsesoundscapes.org/media-kit. And on that page at the bottom, there is a map that shows, as of, I believe we updated it about a week and a half ago. It shows how many people had signed up expressing that they plan to be Eclipse Soundscapes observers or Eclipse Soundscapes data collectors, and how many people have completed the apprentice role training, which is the Eclipse learning role, which is a great thing for anyone who wants to be an Eclipse Soundscapes observer or an Eclipse Soundscapes data collector to do beforehand to make sure that you know all about eclipses.
Mary Kay, could you review if folks are having an Eclipse Day event or attending an Eclipse Day event, how they can get people to participate that maybe have not gone through the whole training process at that point?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I will go ahead and share that slide again so that I can use that slide well. So that's there. All right, let me just share that. So on the eclipsesoundscapes.org/observer /# events, or if you just go to eclipsesoundscapes.org and go to the observer role section, there is a tab that says at events. And when you go to at events, there is a button there where you can download an observer quick start guide. And what that quick start guide does is it has 2 pages at the beginning that just gives a very general overview and a couple of frequently asked questions. If you're facilitating, I would recommend printing this out or downloading it and just having it on you to be able to reference. And then you can hand out the field notes paper to people. And in that quick start guide, which is 6 pages long, there's the first 2 for you with the frequently asked questions and some quick information. Pages 3 and 4 are a front back handout that is meant to quickly explain to people what's going on and give them a place to write down their latitude and longitude, their start time, their location information. It has all those prompts right there on the handout so that people will know what information is needed. And as a facilitator, you won't have to keep explaining this information. It's all right there. And then there's also the QR code and the website right on that handout that lets people know where they can submit their observations. And then there's also 2 more pages, which aren't on the screen, but they are there in the Quick Start Guide, where it is also in Spanish. So there's 2 pages that are there with frequently asked questions, a little general information. And then there is the field notes handout, which is front back in English, and the field notes handout, which is front back in Spanish. And what people have done in the past, and we had some national parks do this in 2023, where they printed out tons and tons of these field notes papers, and they actually handed them out with glasses on Eclipse Day so that people could be a part of this project.
Thank you, Mary Kay. I believe with that, we're caught up, unless anybody had a last minute question that they wanted to raise their hand to verbalize.
One thing I will say, Kelsey, if we unmuted everyone, I want to make sure we give the opportunity for anyone who perhaps doesn't have the hand raise ability on their tab or on their screen, or it's not something they can do to call out their question. Could we give everyone the ability to unmute themselves if they want to be able to call out a question?
I believe so. Let me see if I can do that for you.
Okay.
Okay, at this point, if there is anybody else who would like to unmute themselves and ask a question, you should be able to go ahead and do that.
Martha, did you have a question?
You, sorry.
Yes, I can hear you.
I have a question about weather.
Mhm.
So if it's overcast and cloudy, do we just go by doing the observations via time, even though we might not really be able to appreciate the full solar eclipse visually? Do you still want us to go ahead and identify what we hear, see, and feel during those time schedules of the start, total, max, and
Yes, so definitely, even if it's cloudy, if you are out there and you are ready to observe, we would welcome those. And I would definitely recommend, even if it's not cloudy, using the time as a guide in case you think that something is totality before it is. So even if it's not cloudy, I would still recommend using time as a guide. And definitely, we would like observations, whether it's cloudy, even if it's not. And this is a great thing to think about, that eclipses are experiences that aren't something that are only visual. There are things that you can feel. You might feel a temperature drop, which could be really interesting and drastic and quick. You might hear some sounds. Animals are still recognizing that change, even if it's cloudy. So what's going on with what you're hearing? So when you start to think of it in this multi-sensory way, it's it's really exciting because we don't have to depend on, are the clouds going to part at the exact right moment?
Thank you.
Okay, well, we're right at about 5 o'clock. This has been recorded and will be posted so that if you'd like to review any parts of it, you can. All of the information that I shared today is on the website, eclipsesoundscapes.org. On the website, it is available in English and Spanish. And we really look forward to all of you participating in Eclipse Soundscapes and enjoying the eclipse on April 8th. It'll be a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you.